Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about another aspect of cybersecurity, and specifically why most security starts from good architecture. When we talk about enterprise security, the conversation often centers around tools. SIEM platforms, EDR solutions, firewalls, zero trust frameworks. But in most real-world environments, major security incidents are not the result of missing tools. They are the result of architectural decisions. In this video, I want to explain why most enterprise security is fundamentally about architecture, and why three principles matter more than any specific vendor solution. We've got the principle of least privilege, segmentation, and defense in depth. They are structural design choices, and they are beyond just buzzwords. Security is an architectural property. In large systems, especially distributed and cloud-native systems, security is not a feature that can be bolted on later. It emerges from how the system is structured, how services communicate, how identities are managed, how permissions are assigned, how failure is contained. If architecture is overly permissive or flat, security tools can only compensate so much. So the real question becomes, what does the system assume? First, we've got the principle of least privilege. In enterprise environments, identities are everywhere. They are human users, service accounts, microservices, CI/CD pipelines, cloud roles, containers, and each identity carries permissions. The principle of least privilege means every identity should have only the minimum permissions required to perform its functions, and nothing beyond that. In practice, this affects IAM role design in cloud environments, database access policies, Kubernetes, RBAC, API authorization layers, admin access governance. Over-permissioning is one of the most common structural weaknesses in enterprise systems. Not because teams are careless, but because convenience scales faster than restriction. If a compromised workload has a broad access, the attacker doesn't need to escalate. The escalation is already embedded in the architecture. Least privilege reduces blast radius. It assumes compromise is possible and limits impact by design. Second, we have segmentation. Enterprise systems are inherently distributed. They span multiple networks, multiple environments, hybrid cloud and on-prem, internal and external APIs. Segmentation means deliberately limiting which components can communicate. In networking, this might include subnet isolation, private versus public zones, east-west traffic controls, network access control lists. In cloud and microservice architectures, segmentation extends to service mesh policies, security groups, namespace isolation, and environment separation as well, dev staging, production. Flat architectures increase lateral movement risk. If every service can talk to every other service, a single compromised node can pivot across the environment. Segmentation introduces containment boundaries. It acknowledges the breaches may occur and prevents systemic collapse. And third, we've got defense in depth. No single control is sufficient. Authentication alone is not enough. Encryption alone is not enough. A firewall alone is not enough. Defense in depth means layering controls so that failure in one layer does not expose the entire system. So, for example, input validation at the application layer, authentication at the identity layer, authentication at the service layer, network level restrictions, monitoring and anomaly detection, audit logging and alerting. Each layer reduces dependency on perfection. In distributed systems, assumptions break. Defense in depth accounts for that. It builds resilience into the architecture rather than trusting a single gatekeeper. The enterprise reality is that most large-scale security incidents don't begin with advanced cryptographic attacks. They begin with overly broad IAM roles, flat internal networks, unrestricted service-to-service communication, implicit trust between components, lack of segmentation between environments. And these are not failures of intelligence. They are architectural trade-offs that accumulate over time. Security depth is architectural depth, and architectural depth compounds security as a system design. When security is treated as architecture, the mindset shifts. Instead of asking, how do we stop attackers? We ask, if something fails, how far can it spread? The question changes everything. It changes designs, network topology, service boundaries, and review processes. Security becomes about containment, clarity, and control. So enterprise security is not primarily about buying more tools. It's about designing systems that minimize unnecessary privilege, segment communication deliberately, layer protections intentionally, and most security is not dramatic, it is structural. Good architecture is the most scalable security control an organization can have. So in closing, I hope that was interesting. I hope that you learned something new today. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.